With my partner for 9 years, we were married for 6 months. I thought everything was perfectly wonderful and roses, and then out of nowhere, he told me that he wanted to get a divorce. And I very quickly was sort of flung into this world of being like kind of what I thought was the start of my life, but then what felt like the end of my life. And that was very early on in our relationship. And so the remainder of our relationship featured a lot of my recovery, and that can be a very isolating position to be in. And I think that when you do it with somebody else very closely, whether that's a partner or a parent, you do almost feel like you're this team against the world.
There's this whole wave of older women saying, maybe they've been long time married, saying, I want to go and do an eat, pray, love, really. I want to go and find myself. There's a whole raft of women who are like, I'm bored out of my brain. I can't think of anything worse than staying married. I'm out.
And if I think about the majority of the time we spent as a couple in those 2 years, it was talking about the wedding or looking at wedding plans or thinking about the wedding, or I was with my girlfriends talking about bloody tablecloths or whatever it was. And so you're not thinking, am I actually enjoying spending time with my partner? And it's not real life, because once you get married, all of that stuff to talk about isn't going to be there anymore. One thing that's a real shame is that there is one mental illness that nobody talks about still. And when they do, it's always in a kind of like, it's either in a very glamorized showbiz kind of way or a jokey way. You know, it's still okay to joke about being anorexic.
Oh my God, you're amazing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Have Extraordinary Relationships with me, Lucy Cavendish. And today I've got a very special guest. I heard her and sort of saw her, actually, as we do now on Women's Hour, talking about subpar men. And my ears pricked up, but that's not all she's going to talk about. She's Eve Simmons. Her book is out, What She Did Next, which she's going to talk about lots of different things. And she's a new mum. How old is your baby?
So he's 6 months.
Oh, how is it? How is it being a mother of a 6-month-old? You look great.
Thank you. I've got glasses on because it hides a lot of the exhaustion. It's quite chaotic. It's always challenging, and it's also wonderful and a total learning experience, but in the most fascinating and brilliant way. Yeah, and he's also very, very beautiful. So we're very lucky.
Well, that's helpful.
Yeah. Not that matters so much, obviously.
Well, I think we all think that. But when I had children, I used to look at those babies with the smarty back heads and think, oh, thank God, might have got beautiful heads.
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly looking at him thinking, I don't know how this perfect creature came from me, but somehow it has, and I'm here for it. I'm very excited about it.
So whilst all this is happening, you've had a book published. So we're going to move into a wider, bigger story around food. But let's just start with the book. Tell us about the book and how it came and what it's about.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. The book is an extension, I guess, of sorts, of an article that I wrote in the Daily Mail about 2.5 years ago now, recounting my experience of a blindsiding divorce. So in a nutshell, I was with my partner for 9 years. We were married for 6 months. I thought everything was perfectly wonderful and roses. And then out of nowhere, he told me that he wanted to get a divorce. And I very quickly was sort of flung into this world of being like kind of what I thought was the start of my life, but then what felt like the end of my life, which I know seems very dramatic, but it was like I lost everything in the space of a few months. We had this lovely house in the suburbs, which I thought was going to be my forever home. I thought we were going to have children in the next couple of years. I thought, we just got married. I thought everything was lovely. And all of a sudden it all fell apart. We had to sell the house. He pretty much disappeared from my life. And to be honest, I never really have got that many clear answers as to why that happened the way that it happened. And at the time it happened. But the beauty of hindsight has given me a lot of reflection on the relationship, and I guess we'll get into that later. But so I wrote about it after a lot of kind of deliberation. I decided to share the experience, and I was overwhelmed by the number of women who got in touch with me saying that they had had a similar thing happen to them. And the thing that really struck me at the time was that I really desperately wanted to find stories that were relatable to me, and to know from other women's stories that I would be fine, and to know what it was like on the other side. And what I found really difficult was that the stories that I did read about divorce all involved women who were at least 10 years older than me, most of whom had children, had been with this partner for half their life, and they were in a different phase of their adulthood, and I really felt that there was nothing out there that was speaking to me. So I sort of wanted to be that voice, but I also, from a journalistic point of view, really wanted to find out why what had happened to me. And I was really interested to learn that there is this sort of phenomenon that divorce lawyers know of, about young-ish people that get together, live together for a long period of time, get married, and then very quickly after they get married, it all falls apart. And it's been this kind of question mark for divorce lawyers for a long period of time. So I was really interested to dig into that. So I got a kind of really great cross-section of roughly 16 women and also 2 men, as well as a few other women who gave me little snippets to include, and really kind of delved into their experience of these kind of shock divorces. And all of them are relatively young and had to sort of completely start their lives again. And really it's a tale of, it's part memoir, but also a tale of repair, reconnection with yourself. And I like to see it as a kind of like anxiety reducing tool to help women know that whatever they've been through, they really will be okay, I guess.
So how old were you when you met your, I mean, what do we call him? Your ex-husband, your former husband?
Ex-husband, yeah.
Ex-husband. How old were you when you met him?
I was 22, so I was young.
Okay, so you were young. You were together for 9 years, is that right?
We were together for, just under 9 years, yeah.
Then you got married.
Yes.
So you were not yet 30. No, just over 30.
I was 30. Yes, I was 30 when we got married, yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine that by that point you think you know each other pretty well.
Yes, especially, yes. I mean, I think everyone who's been with somebody for that long amount of time, so they do. But our relationship, I felt, was particularly strong because we had both been through significant mental health problems throughout our relationship. Most kind of, I guess, importantly, my experience of anorexia, which I was hospitalized for. And that was very early on in our relationship. And so the remainder of our relationship featured a lot of my recovery. And that can be a very isolating position to be in. And I think that when you do it with somebody else very closely, whether that's a partner or a parent, you do almost feel like you're this team against the world trying to conquer this thing that's almost impossible.
Yes, it's so hard, anorexia. It's really
And so you think I think we sort of developed this unspoken definition of our relationship that was like so watertight, because we'd fought this completely impossible thing to penetrate and come out the other side, and he'd help me and we'd stay together. And so I think a lot of parts in our relationship, it did really kind of glue us together and created a partnership that was really special and was really necessary for that point in my life. But I think there are also negative connotations to it, which I've gone into in the book.
Okay, you've gone into in the book. What to do with that sort of helper dynamic? I mean, we want people to get in the book, but is it to do with that kind of dynamic where
exactly that? Yeah, exactly that. I think that what happened was I was very lucky in that I managed to make a full and complete recovery.
Well done. Well done.
Um,
It's so
thank,
hard. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, yes, yeah. And at times it did feel like that was never going to be my reality. And I'm yeah, very fortunate that I did. And he was and is a huge part of that. And I would never deny that. But I think that perhaps what happened was that formed so much of the undercurrent of our relationship for so many years that when it wasn't relevant anymore, our roles were a bit undefined in like in terms of the dynamic of the relationship. And so I no longer really needed somebody to care for me. That I don't think I ever really needed that anyway, but in some description. And he no longer had somebody who needed him.
Yeah.
And so I think we struggled to navigate that. And I think he had a lot of repressed anxiety, and probably emotional trauma from my illness. And he didn't have a lot of friends, and like a lot of men, they don't really have in-depth discussions about their feelings. And so I think he was carrying a lot, didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. And so it sort of builds a bit of resentment. And I guess what happened was, like, perhaps he built an idea that I had, he'd given so much to me, and then all of a sudden I didn't need him anymore. And I think he found that quite difficult. And I also found it difficult that he was worried about my health a lot when he didn't really need to be. So
yeah. Yes, I understand. You get stuck in a place, don't you? It's quite hard.
absolutely. And also with physical intimacy, obviously really crucial for a relationship.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for saying that, because people forget that, but it is.
yeah, and I've written about this before. Like, when you
Yeah.
see somebody physically totally transformed to a completely different person, and someone who looks really sick, childlike, and every time you see them, it's just heartbreaking. Even when they physically change again, it must be very difficult to get out of that headspace and to see them again in a kind of like physically desirable way. And I think there was a lot of that for us, but I think the crucial thing was we didn't talk about it properly. We didn't communicate about it properly. And I had suggested therapy many times, and he shut it down. He didn't want to know. So I think maybe there was a world where perhaps it could have worked out, but now in hindsight, like, I'm very glad that it didn't.
Well, because you've met your partner. I mean, it's interesting, if you meet at 22, you get, you start communicating as 22-year-olds. But then you're 30.
Yeah.
But you're still sort of communicating, unless you sort of had help or you just both happen to be very evolved people. You're still communicating as 22-year-olds rather than the age that you're actually at, and people get very stuck with that, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think we did get a bit stuck. To some extent, we sort of moved together, but then I do think there came a point where we were moving in very different directions, and it became clear that the futures that we wanted looked slightly different. And but we were in such a rhythm with each other that we just kind of went ahead with it without really thinking about what we wanted as individuals.
Yeah.
Which I think happens to a lot of people in relationships.
So, I mean, you went and did some research, didn't you, about, well, what is it about these short-lived marriages? You had a long relationship, but a short-lived marriage. And so I'm wondering what you're finding. I think, and tell you that part of it is something happens when you get married. I've seen it so many times when people get married and they split up within a year.
Really?
Yeah, they've been together for ages. There's something about the getting married bit which actually does the opposite of what it's supposed to do. Rather than keep people together, it actually it's sort of like, oh my God, this is actually real.
I think, and in your case, is it mostly men who have pulled the trigger?
Well, no, I'm 59 now, so there's this whole wave of older women saying, they've been long time married, saying, I want to go and do an eat, pray, love, really. I want to go and find myself. There's a whole raft of women who are like, I'm bored out of my brain. I can't think of anything worse than staying married. I'm out. Men, in my experience, don't tend to do that. I've met one or two that have said, actually, I just want to go and find myself. Very few. Most of them have met someone else.
Mm, mm.
Of the men that leave, they're very few of them jump without somewhere to jump to.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether that person turns out to be a long-term partner or
Yeah.
just a sort of short-term solution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was definitely a feature. Um, quite a few men feeling as though they deserve better, or feeling as though they have found something better. And from speaking to psychologists, it's clear that men have much more of an impulsive nature than women. So whereas women, I spoke to women who had affairs as well, and with women it tends to be a sort of very long drawn out process that's
Yeah.
also associated with a very unhappy relationship, and having failed to reconfigure that relationship for a long time, and the affair is kind of like the last straw. Whereas with men, it tends, from my findings, tended to be the other way round. But I think that because I was mostly speaking to couples or women in their kind of late 20s, early 30s, one thing that I think is a big factor is children.
Right.
And for some reason, it's almost like the prospect of having a family doesn't become real until you're married. And the next step is to have a child, even if that's been the plan. It's like they've waited till the absolute last minute to then realize, like my ex said to me, for instance, I realized if we have children together, there really is no going back.
Okay, and rather than the fact we've walked down the aisle and pledged our trust to each other and said all sorts of promises.
Or bought a house together. I mean, that is
yeah, and bought a house together.
So that psychology is interesting, and I saw that quite often. And another thing I think is that couples get very distracted by planning a wedding, and divorce lawyers have said this as well, that what you often see, especially if you have a couple who potentially are planning a big wedding with a lot of guests, or it's a big budget wedding, it takes up so much of the brain space, and that can be a whole 2 years of a relationship. And by the time you get to the other end, one or both of those people may be totally different people, but you've already put in all this effort into this wedding. You sort of feel you have to do it. There was a lot of like, I felt I had to. The wedding was in the schedule. The wedding had been planned, so I felt I had to go along with it.
Oh my God, that's not a good thing to hear.
No, it's not. But I think that's all in hindsight, and I think there's a lot of distraction going on. And actually, when I think about, so our wedding was delayed because of COVID, and so we had a lot longer to think and plan and focus on this wedding, and there was also a lot more pressure on it because the build-up had been so long, and we'd had various different iterations of what we wanted that had changed along the way. And if I think about the majority of the time we spent as a couple in those 2 years, it was talking about the wedding, or looking at wedding plans, or thinking about the wedding, or I was with my girlfriends talking about bloody tablecloths or whatever it was. And so you're not thinking, am I actually enjoying spending time with my partner? And it's not real life, because once you get married, all of that stuff to talk about isn't going to be there anymore.
I mean, I've read the Substacks and the pieces, and got lots of reviews for the book, and there's a lot of painful stuff in it around buying our forever homes and then putting out the things we love in it. I mean, I remember going around that when things got divorced, going around the house thinking that every piece that we loved had a story, and it was a story of us. And it felt deeply sad to me that story was over, and that that we were going to have to sort of sell everything, really.
Yes, I feel that very much. Yes.
Well, I couldn't decide if that was I couldn't decide if that was freeing or very sad, and I think it's probably both.
Yeah, I think I didn't feel that it was freeing until much, much later. In fact, I've recently moved into a new flat with my new partner, and it's the first place that we've bought together. And I, for 3 years, have had most of my the majority of my marriage stuff locked away in a storage cupboard, so I didn't have to, in a storage unit rather, so I didn't have to look at it or decide what I wanted to chuck and what I wanted to keep. And the flat we bought is relatively small, so I have to be very careful about what I bring into it.
Yeah.
And it was the first time in December that I went through it, and I was dreading going through it because I thought I'm going to be emotional and it's going to be difficult. And actually, you're right, it was totally freeing. And I was really pleased to be able to just chuck it in the bin and have absolutely no care whatsoever and really be separate from that part of my life and know that I'm in the best place and where I should be and not back there. I was very pleased and grateful for that. But that took me 3 years.
So was part of it for you? Oh my gosh, I'm so young. I'm just turned. I mean, just early 30s, and I'm divorced.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Divorce always has this horrible stigma, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think people do. They think I failed. We failed. There's a whole
which
thing
is atrocious, given that
it
happens to 1 in 2 of us.
Well,
before we get married. I think that there's this horrible stigma attached to it, and you look around at your peer group and that's not something that you see reflected really, or that I saw reflected in anyone that I associate with in my age group. Everyone was sort of at the beginning and had all of these exciting things planned or in the offing, or already were kind of putting down roots in somewhere or another, whether that was with a partner or on their own. And it's this, psychologically, you have an idea of a path that you're on. And I think that when you're at the very beginning and it just gets totally thrown up into the air, you really don't know where to start. And I found that really, really, really hard. And I think also, I write about this in the book, that you may think sort of, okay, well, that obviously there's different challenges at different stages of life, and you could argue in your early 30s you're still, perhaps your career is very front and central, and so you're always mixing with people, and you can be always out, and you've got a lot more opportunities in your early 30s than you may have in your mid 50s to meet people, or and you can still have children and blah blah blah. However, I think the problem is that at that stage, people who were single have really carved out a really exciting, great life for themselves. And people who are in couples are, generally speaking, living in quite a kind of relatively contained life with the two of them. And so I certainly found that I just didn't fit in anywhere.
Yes.
Because it was like I couldn't go back to being single Eve, because single Eve was 22 and completely different life.
Yeah.
And I had built up this life with a person, and I was a duo for such a long time that I didn't know what to do on the weekends if it wasn't going to the farmer's market around the corner from where we lived, or taking the dog for a walk, or I didn't know who I was and what I liked to do, which I'm sure is a lot of divorced people as well. But there wasn't any kind of group that I could identify with to sort of slot myself into. And so I felt very, very isolated. And a lot of the women who went through divorce quite young said that they felt a similar way and found that also incredibly challenging.
What helped you? Because I think it's interesting. I think when you're a newly single person, you're still used to being one of the two. I wake up and look over and think, oh God, he's not here. And that felt awful, so painful, so painful. But then over a period of time, that sort of changes because you start becoming one of a one, and then you think, well, oh, great, hallelujah, I can lie in bed, do whatever I want to do. I mean, so but there's a bit in the middle where you're trying to kind of work it out. What got you through those sort of, oh, look, I'm here at the farmer's market on my own, buying a solitary role?
I think a few things. I think firstly, the thing that I found one of the most depressing actually turned out to be, I think, my biggest savior, which was moving back home.
Okay.
I moved, and it wasn't my childhood home or anything, because my mum had moved a couple of times since I moved out of home. So she had relatively recently moved into a new flat that I didn't really know, and it didn't feel like home. And it was that stigma thing again of like, I had my own house. I was very lucky to own a house at 31, and I had a dog and a life and a whatever. And now suddenly I'm moving back home. I feel like I'm taking 100 steps back.
Mm.
That thing of not having your independence as well. Like, and obviously
Yeah.
my mum was terribly worried about me, so it would be like difficult to have my own space. And at first I really hated that. I found that really depressing, and it was nothing to do with her. It was just what it symbolized for me, I think.
Yes.
And then very quickly it really kind of became my safety net, and reminded me of who I was and what I like to do. And it was just like a really safe place for me to do nothing if I wanted to do nothing, and explore things I wanted to explore, and have conversations with my mum that reminded me of something I did before my ex existed, and things I like to do. And it also meant that I was in an area where a lot of friends that I'd lost touch with lived. And so I saw them again for the first time in years. And it wasn't anything particularly exciting. It wasn't anything particularly like I've rediscovered something in my inner soul, but it was just the kind of familiarity of stuff I already knew, reminding me of the bits of myself that I liked, I think, and that were still there. Because you do take on so much of someone else's personality when you're with someone for such a long time.
Yes. Yes.
And I'd also massively lost confidence. And so I think being with people who just really knew me kind of deep down and really cared about me and loved me unconditionally kind of obviously did something for my confidence and made me feel sort of like a bit pieced back together. So that was the first thing. And then when I felt a little bit more buoyant, I took a job in New York.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah. And I moved to New York for 9 months, and that was the best thing that I could have done.
That was brave.
It was brave, yeah, it was. A job came up, and I thought, when else am I going to do this? I've got nothing to lose. I don't have any responsibilities. Let's see. But I was terrified, and I thought I'd probably last a month and then come home. And I lasted 9, which was good.
It's a tough place to be, no? Tough.
It is. I was lucky in that one of my best friends had moved there a couple of months earlier, because we worked for the same company, and so she had got a secondment a couple of years earlier. So I was joining her, so I felt quite safe in that respect. And there was a whole kind of group of us from the same company who had gone out to New York. So it was a little bit like a little family of people who sort of knew each other, and we would all go out together, and that, I think, gave me a bit of a comfort zone. But to be honest, mostly at first it was not pretty. I was not in a good way for the first couple of weeks. Terrified, anxious, had absolutely no social confidence, which was very unlike me. I just thought no one would want to talk to me, and I was this strange divorced girl. And again, it's the thing of not feeling like you fit in, because I was around mostly people in their late 20s, early 30s, which I was as well. But I guess, quite an old soul. And I think when you've been living a very domesticated adult life, then being thrown into this pool of like being out every night, planning trips to Vegas.
Yes.
It's a completely different world, and you're not sure where you want to be. I wasn't sure that I really wanted to do all of that, but I also didn't want to just sit in on my own, obviously.
Yeah,
And
because
I
it's not
also
that
was,
kind of a place. It's not a place where you're sitting on your own and make
no,
yourself dinner and watch Netflix. It's not
no,
that kind of a place, is it?
no, it's not. You're out there and you're in it and you're meeting people, and it's very much a culture of go to a bar on your own and
Mm.
see what happens.
Mm.
And I really think it was the best thing for me, because it forced me out of my shell, and it forced me to try my independent lifestyle on quickly. And it was a series of firsts. I'd never lived on my own. I'd never paid a bill on my own. I'd never worked out how to set up utilities or anything like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, doing it in New York, also like not the easiest system to navigate.
No, I lived in New York when I was in my late 20s with a baby. I couldn't even manage to open a bank account.
Wow. Yeah. Gosh, you're a
I mean,
hero.
I was just like, why you think it's so efficient. I was walking around just saying, just why does nothing work? It was very funny.
Nothing works and no one's helpful.
No, I know. I kept getting cockroaches. There were rats. I was like, this is horrible. And no
Yeah.
one was interested in helping at all.
No one does anything about it. I remember we had this really bad rat problem in our apartment, and we were on the second floor and they were getting up to the second floor.
No, they were
And we tried to
abseiling up the
say,
time. Yeah.
even the people in the building were just like, oh, yeah, it's New York. And we were obviously these like terribly nice English girls that couldn't understand why no one was being polite and helpful.
What were you supposed to do with them then? Just like invite them around for dinner, the rats, and just give up?
Presumably. Eventually, I was a difficult woman, and we got a month's worth of rent back.
So you learn a lot of things. You also learn how to be difficult and say not good enough, mate. Well
Yeah, and
done.
have confidence in your own choices. I think for my
Mm.
ex was very he was very capable, and he was also very instructive when it came to house stuff and life stuff. We had fallen into this dynamic where he kind of took care of all of that, because I was working very long hours for the majority of our relationship.
Yeah.
So it was just this kind of unsaid thing. It's a massive regret of mine that I just let that happen and I didn't involve myself. And as a result, when it all came crashing down, I had no clue who our water supplier was. Like, I didn't know any of that, and that's shameful. But it also instilled in me this fear that I wouldn't be able to do any of it, because he had done it for so long. How on earth would I be able to? And I think he could be also quite patronizing and quite condescending. And it's only after we broke up that I realized a lot of my beliefs in my capabilities had come from things he had said over the years, and his attitude towards me. And I had really absorbed that. And so a lot of New York, I think, was about reclaiming my abilities to do life and not be like told I couldn't do stuff, and prove to myself that I was perfectly capable. And in fact, I could do it all at the same time as like writing a book and making friends and having the most fabulous time in New York. And I didn't need anyone to do it for me or hold my hand while I did it. And, there were things like I was always really, really scared of pumping up my own tires in my car. I mean, this is when I was in London, and I'm still quite nervous about that because I'm not the best at it. But I remember just being absolutely petrified when the light came on, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this, and sitting there crying. And then it brings it all back, and you're like, I'm alone and my life's dreadful. And then I went to a garage and I just said to a guy there, like, you think you can help me pump up my tires? He was like, yeah, sure. And he did it for me. And that was great. And off I went. And I guess that, like, the lesson there was you might not be able to do everything yourself, but there'll be someone who can help you, usually.
And it's happy to help you.
Yes. Unless you're in New York, and then
In which case, yeah, but you won't be driving your car around New York anytime.
Exactly.
No one has a
Exactly.
car in New York. Yeah. So obviously you met your partner and you've had your beautiful baby. Now, you also said to me that you wanted to talk about food and your relationship with food. And I know you've written about your anorexia very openly, which I think is so brave again, but also very helpful for people because I mean, I was anorexic when I was a young teenager, and this is a long time ago. No one talked about it, and still people don't really talk about it. And when I say, you know, people say, "What's your issues with your weight?" I'm like, well, actually, I was anorexic when I was young, and I used to make myself, you know, I didn't eat.
Mm.
People don't really want to talk about it.
No, I think it's, I always, my kind of biggest gripe with the whole mental illness trend, I hate to say trend. I mean, look, on the whole, it's a wonderful thing that everyone's talking about mental illness. It's a wonderful thing that my child's generation are going to feel a lot less shame and a lot less embarrassment about talking about those incredibly important topics and asking for help. That's brilliant. But I think that one thing that's a real shame is that there is one mental illness that nobody talks about still, and when they do, it's always in a kind of like, it's either in a very glamorized showbiz kind of way or a jokey way. You know, it's still okay to joke about being anorexic.
Yeah, yeah.
Or it's in like, look at this super skinny, gross, disgusting person. And it's the sharp end of mental illness. It's similar to severe mental illness like schizophrenia and psychosis. No one wants to talk about it.
No, you
It's
don't.
not cool. It's not trendy. It's not pretty. You can't put stuff in an Instagram quote. And I think that the result is that there's a whole population of people who are totally neglected and who the sort of explosion in mental health culture, I guess, is really not speaking to. And I think that that's a real shame.
Yeah. So you were saying about your relationship with food has changed because you were saying that food's been such a big thing for you, and I'm sure that there's lots of good things about your relationship with food as well. You say you've had your baby.
Hugely, hugely. I mean, I always say the thing about anorexia recovery, and I'm sure you'll relate to this too, is that you can always be a bit more recovered, but you'll never know that you need to be a bit more recovered. And I'm constantly surprised by something that happens, and I think, oh, actually, I wouldn't have done that a year ago, and I thought I was super recovered a year ago. And I guess what it means is we're all work in progress, and there's no straight line. And but I think I have been really fully recovered since I got my menstrual cycles back, which was in 2020. And getting to that point was a huge uphill struggle. And mostly in that period of time, I thought this would be something I would live with for the rest of my life. I couldn't see a time when I wouldn't be thinking about food, and I wouldn't be worried about calories, and I wouldn't be able to gain weight without worrying about it. And there's something quite miraculous and empowering about having those, knowing how set you were in those beliefs, and then actually getting to a point when you completely disprove yourself. And I do feel there's something quite nice about knowing that you can't predict the future. And that actually, like, you are likely to be totally wrong about a lot of things.
Yes.
Yeah, as I was about that. And yeah, I mean, and being pregnant was another lesson for me, because I realized the first time that I didn't care at all about eating healthily. Not at all. I was like, I am going to want whatever I want. I'm going to eat whatever I want. I don't care what's in it. I don't care who's made it. I don't care. if it's scraped off the floor, I'm starving.
Really interesting. Right. So was that from a position of I'm just starving, or is it something to, I mean, I remember when I got pregnant with my eldest son, who's now 29, it was as if someone had opened a key to a jail.
Yeah.
But then I went bonkers and ate like everything. It was, that wasn't that great either.
Yeah. I didn't actually, I think in my head, I was really, really hungry the whole time, but I don't actually think I was eating as much as I thought I was.
Mm.
But I just didn't, I just didn't have those kind of like slight glasses, which I think are just like maybe the glasses that women are told to put on from when they're old enough to be conscious of the world, which is you must eat healthily, you must eat, well, probably not just women actually. And that was just totally stripped away. And also being a health journalist, I'm constantly exposed to like, the latest food that gives you cancer and
Oh God, yeah, of course. Yeah, we didn't have any of that.
guidance. Yeah. And I know that all of that's a load of crap, but like I'm also obviously very cognizant of the latest NHS guidelines and the World Health Organization guidelines and all of that stuff and the kind of sensible health advice. But that was all just totally out the window. It was just like, if I want to have 10 potatoes today, I will have 10 potatoes today and I don't care and I'll enjoy it.
So it sounds it was quite freeing to be able to think and feel that.
Yeah, it was freeing. It was freeing. And also, again, made me realize, oh, okay, I still have been quite like preferring healthier foods, which is an interesting concept anyway, because that's not, for the average person, that's the goal. That's what you want. But for someone with a history of an eating disorder, you question, it's always a question mark. And I guess that will always be the case. I'll never really know what's my true preference and what's still a bit of eating disorder. But that's just the way it is, I guess.
Did it start around puberty or is it later than puberty?
No, so I think that I think I was quite atypical because my illness started when I was 22. Really relatively out of nowhere. I've always been like had a very great constitution in that I can eat a lot and not put on a lot of weight, and I've always been very genetically small. So I've never worried about dieting. I've never worried about putting on weight. I had some friends at school who would often talk. They were like a bit more curvy than me and would always talk about how they wanted to diet and they were worried they'd eaten too much. And it was like a different language to me because I didn't worry. I was very lucky in that sense. And then my first job out of journalism at school was at a fashion magazine. I wanted to work in fashion. And I very quickly learned that it was not a good idea for me because everyone around me didn't eat. And if they did, they ate very little. And if they ate, they would have a conversation that would bookend the meal about how much they ate and whether they should exercise later and And my extremely healthy relationship with food very quickly changed. It was also around the time of the clean eating movement.
Right. Yeah.
So it was often, this is the case with eating disorders, there's no one thing that's like, a big trigger, but it's a multi-variant, lots of different factors. And I think that I was a prime example of that. So it was all the clean eating stuff I was getting into on social media. It was my world in fashion. And then I think it was a bit of an identity crisis in that I had just moved out of my family home. It was for the first time, and I had just got with my ex-husband, my partner, which was the first big relationship that I'd been in. And I think there was a lot of me trying to figure out who I was and try on different identities for size. But I also think part of it was an anxiety, a kind of manifestation of an anxiety disorder,
Right.
which I only have really discovered a lot later.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
because I had dalliances with anxiety when I was 15, 16.
mm,
And then it would sort of peak and then go away for a bit and then peak and go away for a bit. And I didn't ever really have it dealt with. And in hindsight, only last year I wrote about this, that
mm.
I had discovered that it was actually OCD rather than anxiety.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
And I believe that my anorexia was some form of OCD, or at least began as a form of
Mm,
OCD,
mm,
because it was never a goal. It was never a physical goal. I never wanted to be thin. I
mm,
never had body dissatisfaction or body
mm.
dysmorphia until I got very unwell, which is a symptom of being very thin. Um, it was almost like a psychological game, like a habit that I had formed in my head.
Yes.
It began as, oh, let me see if I can get away with not eating breakfast today and see how I
Yeah.
get on. And then after a while, it was, oh, I'm going to see if I can stop eating lunch. And then it was, oh, I'll see if I can just have a small salad for dinner. And then after a while, when I realized I'd lost weight and I was told you need to start eating more and up your calories, I found that I couldn't.
Yes.
I was stuck in this habit. And that is much more of an OCD type thinking pattern than
Yeah.
traditional anorexia.
Yeah.
Um, but obviously, I was subsequently diagnosed with anorexia because I lost a lot of weight and couldn't eat, and that's what the illness is. But I think that the two are very closely interlinked.
It's very scary. I
Terrible.
imagine. Very
Mm.
scary to I imagine getting thinner and thinner, knowing you need not to be getting thinner because it's actually making you very sick, but being incapable of eating.
You feel so unbelievably out of control.
Yeah.
And most people with anorexia, that's the one thing that they fear the most. And that's what they're trying to do by not eating.
Mm.
Um, and you your brain convinces you that you're eating enough, at least enough. Your brain convinces you that you're eating too much.
Mm.
And so you have no way, it's like you're blind suddenly. You just have no way of trusting yourself. And but somehow the illness also tells you that you can't trust everyone around you. So it's incredibly, yeah, terrifying and very isolating, and becomes very hopeless very quickly.
I
Yeah.
just remember looking in the mirror and thinking I was fat.
Hmm.
You know, now I look back at photographs of me at 16, 17, and I'm obviously very thin. But
Yeah.
I couldn't see, I mean, I'm like a skeleton, but I couldn't see it. Couldn't see it.
Yeah, me, it's funny. So I never thought I was fat, but when I was anorexic, I I didn't look at myself in the mirror and think I look like I'm about to die.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
but a dietitian, an eating disorder specialist dietitian who I work with, who probably saved my life, to be honest,
mm.
she said to me, "You'll only see it when you look at pictures,"
Yes.
and she was totally right. If I saw a picture of myself, I would be like quite shocked, but I couldn't see it in the mirror.
No.
It's very, very bizarre.
Yeah. But I mean, you got pregnant, which is great because you might have been worried that that was difficult because obviously, our bodies have got to be able to do that.
Yes, I was very worried about that for a long
Yeah.
time.
Yes. And you've met your lovely partner.
I have, yes.
Um, what do you feel has been really, our lives sometimes really crash and burn in ways we don't expect it. I mean, I think if someone had told me, let's say 10 years ago, even 7 years ago, oh, in 7 years' time or 5 years' time, you'll be, living here doing that. I wouldn't have believed them. I just wouldn't have believed them, be divorced. Da, 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 I just wouldn't have believed them. I'd have thought they'd have lost their minds. So I think from what you've said also that you had, because you were so blindsided,
Mm.
So we're still here. I'm very happy. You're happy. So what advice, what help do you want to give other people about how do we survive these things? And I know we all do it differently, but what helps us through?
I think that's going to look different for every person.
Mm.
But I guess for me, one thing that I've always really lent on has been distraction. And this may be unhealthy, but I think a certain amount of it is very useful in getting you over at least that initial hump. And
Mm.
I don't know whether, for some people that is throwing yourself into work for a couple of weeks. For
Yeah,
some people that is going to a new city and
yeah,
totally taking on
yeah,
whatever that throws at you.
yeah,
For some people, it's getting involved in a charity or
yes,
whatever that is. And I think that that can give you, especially if it's something to you that feels very important, it
mm,
can give you
mm,
the gift of perspective.
mm,
And
mm,
so I think in the short term, that can be a helpful strategy.
mm. I found work incredibly useful.
Me too. Me too. I always have
I
done.
just had to go. I thought because in work, I just had to be in work, and I knew how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going to go and work because I know how to work, and I
Yes.
don't have to talk about it, and I don't have to think about it. I'm just going to go to work, and I found that very helpful.
Yeah, me too. I think there were some points where I think the first day afterwards that I just like my brain wasn't working, and I had to say to my boss, who thankfully has been so understanding and kind,
Mm,
I need to go home. But that was like one day or 2 days maybe.
mm,
And yeah, you're absolutely right, especially with what we do and
mm,
working in the sphere of health. I think has gifted me the opportunity to speak to people who are in really life or death situations, or doctors who are potentially finding a cure for some terrible disease. And
yes,
it's great because it gives you the opportunity to be objective.
yeah,
um, so I think that's one nugget of advice I would give. And also, it's so cliche, but just to keep remembering that time is such a healer, and
mm, mm,
that you will feel like absolute crap for an undisclosed amount of time.
yes, yeah,
And that is just the way, unfortunately, that it will be. And there's nothing you can do to stop it.
yeah,
And all you can do is sit in it and surround yourself with the people who know you the best and just want to take care of you and make you feel loved. And then there will come a point where you'll feel a little bit lighter, and then another point where you'll feel a little bit more lighter, and that will go on and on and on. Um,
mm,
but don't try and rush it, I think.
mm.
And I'm always honest in the fact that I take an antidepressant, and I found that that's been very helpful in difficult periods of my life.
Yeah, yeah. I know someone said to me, it's a second at a time, and then it will be a minute at a time, half a minute, then a minute, and one day. It'll be months at a time. Then one day it'll be a year, and you'll have felt fine. They were just you just got to hold on to the bit of you that knows at some point, gradually, 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 you won't feel in such agonizing pain.
Absolutely. And also I think what I've learned from the book is that
Mm.
women are remarkable in the way that they reinvent themselves and
Yeah.
find joy and find happiness in, like you said, ways that they never would imagine that they would. And there's a whole chapter where I've explored female communes, which is
Mm.
amazing. Um,
Mm.
and this brilliant woman who's had lots of failed relationships and has ended up with the child but isn't quite sure that she's going to be with the partner of the child, and her big dream is to just move to the countryside with all her girlfriends and grow old with them and have a farm, and they can all bring up their children together. And I just thought that sounds like heaven. Not that I don't obviously adore my partner,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So people do, yeah, I love that. So you're exploring lots of different ways of being.
Yeah, exactly. And we're so taught that there is just this one way. And I think that with that comes a lot of panic if you don't have that. But women for centuries have found different ways of being that have brought them extreme joy and extreme fulfillment and happiness. And there's nothing to say that that's not out there for everyone. It just might not look how you thought like you thought it would look. That makes sense.
We have to finish now, but we could carry on for ages. So tell us about your book again. Where can we get it? What's it called? Give us a big plug for your book.
It's called, I think I actually have it here.
Go wave it at us.
I can wave it at you.
Yeah, wave it at us so we can see it. Here we go. What do you do next? Yeah, it's great.
What to do next? What to do when the life that you planned is effed up.
Yeah. Well,
and it's out now in all good bookshops and on Amazon, and I think you can order it on the Waterstones website, and it's also available on Audible in audiobook form, and it's also available on Kindle.
And you're on Insta. I follow you. Yes. You did a great reel tonight, I think, with your baby and talking about money, which we won't go into right now. But people can find you, can't they, on Insta?
Yes, I'm at Evie Sim.
And anything else, a website or anything else you want to tell us about, or is that?
I Substack. I have a Substack.
Yes, you do. It's great, your Substack.
Oh, thank you. I think it's just evesimmons.substack.com, but the Substack is called Why Am I Bleeding? So if you search Why Am I Bleeding?
It's called Why Am I Bleeding?
Yeah.
I got. I was like, why is she bleeding? Yeah. Good time.
Well, because it was sort of just about women's health, and I feel like that's just a question that women ask
all the time.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm also on TikTok at Eve Simmons Journal.
Oh my God, you're amazing. Well done. I can't do Substack.
It's not as hard as it looks. I also thought, and I avoided it for a long time, and then my publisher was like, you should probably get on TikTok, and I was like,
I know, but I look at Substack and I think, you see, you write so much already. I think the last thing I want to do is write anything else. But I love it. I think it's great, Substack. It's great.
Yeah. It's really good that writers can have ownership of their own stuff and their own following. It's
great. So lots of places to find you.
Yes, please do. Come find me.
So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Thank you for agreeing to come on and telling us, being so open and honest and brave about everything. I really appreciate it.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Lucy. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thank you.